It's February 2022. This is the Pilote podcast, episode 1, with David Fuller and Cory Smith. Joining me is Cory Smith. Say hello, Cory.
Hello, Cory Smith. Oh, wait, I'm Cory Smith. Hello.
Right. Yeah, so we've known each other for a while. There is an origin story, but maybe we'll share that some other time.
Yes, that's a long and storied story.
Although it was Daytona last weekend. Did you notice that? And we met in the motorsport business.
Yeah, I still stay connected with our friends in motorsports, particularly the photographers. So they always pop up in my social media and Instagram, and I see the pictures from Daytona.
All right, so we're here to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. We've left the topic really broad, but in essence, it's disruption. It's kind of like the overarching subject that we talk about, and that could be disruptive technology, that could be all kinds of stuff. So that's anything from the printing press to the metaverse.
Yeah, and everything in between.
The currency or Web3 or metaverse and some of those subjects that sit within that, whether it's NFTs or IoT, lots of acronyms in this business. And they've turned these acronyms into brands. I can't believe NFT is going to be the worst name for a product ever.
Yeah, I agree. What does it stand for? Non-flexible? I don't know.
Non-fungible token. And now I don't think anyone's ever used the word fungible before NFTs arrived. Right?
I think NFTs are the most asked about topic that I get from people, lay people. Right. What is an NFT?
It's not a date word, though, is it? I mean, it's not the word. It's not a word you like sit and you go out and you're like, oh, I've been doing some fungible stuff today. Let's get into it, because in the news this week, the Super Bowl is imminent, and NFL is a big thing in your part of the world. Not so much where I'm from. I'm an AFL guy, but that's Australian rules football for anyone who needs to look that up. But the Super Bowl and Mr. Tom Brady's in the news again, not necessarily because of his on-the-field antics, but his off-the-field antics. He's going into NFTs, along with a whole bunch of other celebrities, Usain Bolt, Tony Hawk. Tom Brady has retired, apparently officially, to spend more time with his NFT company, which is called Autograph. Now, 2021, year of NFTs, most of them pretty weird, algorithmically generated artworks, different hats, different backgrounds, different weapons, different something or other.
Digital trading cards.
Digital. This is top trumps, but on the blockchain. But maybe the sports ones have a little bit more value. You know,
why? That's my question. Why? Why do they have more value?
I remember walking into a NASCAR factory, and they have a little shop at the front, like a little merchandise store.
Right.
And they sell bits of wrecked cars, right? So, you know, they've got the Dale Earnhardt car, which was in a wreck, and the fender came off, and they sell you the piece of the wrecked fender for $72 or whatever, $72 or whatever. And you go, okay, well, maybe I can hang that on my wall in my man cave, and that'll be cool. That'll be a piece of talking conversation. Or maybe I collect comics, or maybe I collect, you know, old-fashioned baseball cards, and I keep them in the plastic because one day I think maybe I can sell them at Christie's. Someone might be interested, and whatever else. But how does that translate exactly into a blockchain-based collectible? Like I said, I'm old school, so I'm still waiting for someone to explain it.
Yeah, I struggle with that too, because I look at NFTs in a more pragmatic business sense, right? Like, I understand the value of an NFT. We're most recently working in the insurance business, using an NFT as a contract instrument, right? Or putting in an insurance policy, attaching an insurance policy or something to it. You know, $500, $300, $3,000, $18,000 for an NFT for a digital trading card. I'm not connecting the dots on the value other than the collectability of it. And then, like, I have to ask myself, what value is that going to have 5, 6, 8, 10 years from now? And is anybody going to care? I don't know. They just seem like Pogs or Beanie Babies.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. I think there'll be a certain set of them that because they were the first, if you look at the apes or whatever they were the first ones. And okay, if you got in early, great. When we met, my business partner and I, Dan, I'm sure we're going to get Dan on the show at some point. We flew over from the UK to Sebring to talk to you guys when you were working at the American Le Mans Car Series. And we had an idea that said, okay, we want to sell wallpapers for your phone. Yeah, this is going back there, right? And we want to be able to, you need to be able to put the number 7 yellow Corvette from the ALMS series on your phone as your wallpaper, and you can buy that, for a couple of bucks. Or you can download the ringtone, which is the sound of that Corvette, or the sound of the Audi, prototype. That was pretty new at the time, and a lot of people were saying then, well, why would you spend $5 on the sound of a Corvette that I could walk outside and record it myself and make it my ringtone? Okay, it's a similar kind of concept, right? You can get one of these artworks as a JPEG, right click, get it yourself, but it's a limited edition, and now the blockchain says this is the original. It comes with a certificate of authentication, and you're the one who's got the original. And I kind of get that, and I get the sport. I get that. I get the sport element too, right? So if it is Tom Brady or Tony Hawk or Usain Bolt, and it's a digital representation of a collectible, the same as a trading card, a cardboard piece of trading card. I can see the collectible point of view if you're a celebrity, but it is a cult of celebrity and nothing else.
Sure.
And there is nothing to say.
But I guess you can look at it like you look at art, right? Like I think that's the thing that I've seen, the comparison that I've seen most often is that they compare it to artwork in the art world, right? It's you go to a gallery and you buy an original artwork, and you're the only one that owns it, and there's provenance to it, and there's intrinsic value to that piece of artwork, and intellectually I understand that. I do. Yeah,
I get that in the art world as well. But I can't imagine an artist saying, well, let's paint 7,000 Mona Lisas, each with a different smile and a different background, and the eyes pointing in a slightly different direction in each one, and they'll all be unique. Yeah, they'll all be unique. Right. But there'll be 5,000 instead of one.
Right. Exactly. Well, and the other thing that I think has been kind of an interesting offshoot of that conversation is the IP, intellectual property implications of people creating these NFTs. I'm sure you saw the most recent story about Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, I did see that one.
Who owns the IP? If you sell the IP, even if the movie studio sells the IP and says, okay, we're selling the IP in this frame from Pulp Fiction, well, what about the actors? What if it's John Travolta in the frame? Does he get a piece of it? Like,
I remember that again back in the day when we were talking to NASCAR, and we had a screensaver, and we thought it was really simple. We just thought, we'll get a bunch of pictures and we'll, put them on a screensaver. And we talked to people. We talked to F1. We talked to NASCAR. And they started to say, well, it's not exactly that simple. At the end of the day, if there's one car, that's fine. If there's two cars, they're racing. And if they're racing, it's owned by the series. And if there's a driver in it, then there's personal driver image rights. And then there's the photographer's rights. And then there's a really complicated set of rights that sit within that. Now, on the one hand, blockchain could help solve some of that. Right? If you were to write into the smart contract within that image and say, okay, here are the rights that are associated with this image, and the driver gets a percentage, or the athlete gets a percentage, the photographer gets a percentage, the series gets a percentage, whoever other, the manager or the agent gets a percentage, and you write all of that into a smart contract that says, next time this image is sold, that revenue from that image gets split in these percentages for all time, then that actually is really interesting.
That is really interesting. Yeah, I love that. But like it's one of those things like you and I discussed before. It's like when social media started, we don't know what the implications of that are yet. We haven't this is new. So, like you said, if it's got 2 cars in it, the series zones or whatever, it's like, okay, well, the actor that was in the frame of this photo or this film snippet that they've put in an NFT, is it in their contract? Right. Like they haven't even, that was before they even thought about this stuff. Is it going to create all these kind of legal issues? It'll be interesting to see. I'm sure it's going to come up. Other podcasts. I've
got things that I saved on floppy disks 20 years ago, but I mean, the technology to even access these NFTs in the future, we're just assuming, and blockchain is the cool thing right now, and we say it's immutable and we say that it's unchangeable, but you've got to have the power to keep these things running forever in order to keep them going, right? I'm sitting in Athens, Greece, and I can look at the Parthenon, and whatever they carved into the top of that building 4,000 years ago is still there. But there's nothing to say that anyone's going to keep the blockchains turned on for the next 20 years if something else comes along.
That's right. The other thing I wanted to ask you, which I think is interesting that you said earlier, was the cult of celebrity. Because you see, like, Tom Brady's not the only one. Lots of celebrities are jumping into this NFT market, which, of course, kind of reminds me of the early internet boom days of the celebrities jumping in on the internet startups. And I feel like it's a fad. Do you think they'll, because you see Matt Damon out there pushing cryptocurrency exchanges now. And so
I think there's two things going on there. One is the Matt Damon thing is just a pure old fashioned celebrity endorsement, right? It's like, well, he's put his face to it, and if he says it's cool, then maybe I should go and check it out. That's just that. I don't know what his back end deal is. Maybe he's getting some crypto.com currency. Who knows? Right. There's a bunch of footballers who've been paid in tokens. Their new contracts are PSG tokens instead of euros or whatever else. So there's one which is just celebrity endorsement. The other one is, to be fair, there've been some celebrities who've done pretty well out of this. Ashton Kutcher is, this isn't blockchain, but startup stuff. Ashton Kutcher is a really savvy investor. He invested in Airbnb, invested in a ton of startups. But the difference is that most of their startups have utility. They actually have a product which they're selling to a consumer, and there's value there. There's a catch-all phrase called Web3, which includes a whole bunch of different technologies and a whole different bunch of concepts. And if you go all the way back to the original Bitcoin white paper, that is all about removing intermediaries and creating a system that you don't need a bank standing in the way of you and me doing a transaction, that there is a way that we can use cryptography and encryption and a whole bunch of other different technologies in order to be able to remove the intermediary. And that transaction is still a trustworthy transaction. And there's a group of people who are pushing this Web3 idea, which is creators, if you like, or athletes or people who have rights and can monetize those rights, don't need the intermediaries anymore. Tom Brady doesn't need to go through his agent, doesn't need to go through his team, doesn't need to go through the NFL. Tarantino doesn't need to go through the studios. There's a way of taking out some of these intermediaries using blockchain, and they can sell their IP, let's call it IP, directly to their fans without someone else taking a cut. And NFTs have been kind of used in that are being used right now in that mechanism to say, you can get access to me as a celebrity or as an athlete. If you buy this NFT, you get to talk to me on my WhatsApp 3 times a week. Okay, great. You don't necessarily need blockchain to do that, but you could use Patreon or some Web2 technology in order to give access. But I think the other weird thing is the pricing. No one ever really talks about the pricing, and they're insane.
Yeah.
Right? They're insane. It's one thing to sell a ringtone for $5, and I used to think that was expensive, right? Premium rate SMS. I'm downloading an 8-bit version of the Top Gun theme, which sounds like it was played on a kid's keyboard, and I'm paying $5 for it, and I feel ripped off. But if I'm paying three Ethereum, which right now is about $7,500, what?
And that's the disconnect for me. Is like how are we, or how are they is placing the value on these?
If you got your Ether for 25 cents, then it's nothing. If you're buying in today and the Ether's at $3,500, then that's a totally different story. So there are thousands of people. It's not the mass market, but there's thousands of people out there who bought Ether and Bitcoin and a bunch of other coins when they were sub 10 cents.
Nothing. Yeah.
And they've got thousands of them, and for them, that's nothing. That's no money. But at their current value, that's stupid money. And that, I think, is where this whole thing falls apart. You can only flip these things until you end up with some poor middle-class schmuck who came in late and went, hey, I bought a Bored Ape for $27,000. Probably the wrong example, but if you were to buy a random NFT today for $27,000, here's a challenge for anyone listening. Within the next 7 days or before our next podcast, here is a challenge for you. Buy an NFT somehow, and that is not easy. It's right. Getting slightly easier. You can use your credit card to buy an NFT on some marketplaces, but buying an NFT is hard. You've got to have a certain wallet. You've got to fund that wallet with a certain cryptocurrency. You've got to buy the NFT. You've got to have blah, blah, blah. It's from a consumer experience, it's horrible. Right. Okay. So try and buy an NFT, part 1. Part 2, try and sell it at a profit.
Right.
And part 3, try and withdraw those profits into fiat currency, as in back into US dollars or British pounds or Australian dollars. I dare anyone within 7 days to be able to buy an NFT for money, make a profit on it, sell it, and convert it back to cash.
And if you do, tell us how you did it.
Well, yeah. I mean,
because I'd like to know.
So let's move on. Interestingly, this week, India says that it will legalize cryptocurrency trading, which is a massive deal. Several 100 million people are now legally allowed to trade cryptocurrency, but there's a catch. And the catch is 30%. That any profits made on that cryptocurrency trading will be taxed at 30%.
Wow.
Fairly hefty.
Wow.
What do you think? What do you think about this, man?
I think that's incredible. And then they're like, oh, and by the way, we're developing our own cryptocurrency.
Which, on the one hand, apparently won't be taxed at the same rate, because that will be considered a currency and not a digital asset. So, it's a pretty blunt instrument. There are some interesting companies out there that are going to make a ton of money by algorithmically managing your. But yeah, there's some interesting ones out there that are basically you connect your wallets to via their API. They will monitor your trades. They will work out whether you've made a profit or loss, and then they will submit that at the end of the year to the relevant tax authorities and apply the relevant tax calculations. Interestingly enough, this week, the UAE, which has always been tax-free for companies, has announced a 9% company tax, which that will have some interesting impacts as well. But on the tax side, I also have noticed, because I'm a bit of a digital nomad, that Portugal has no crypto tax at all. So they're going down the route of, we want to attract investors, entrepreneurs, crypto people to Portugal, and we will offer no tax on crypto as an incentive for people to move to Portugal or base their businesses in Portugal.
And they're advertising that, right?
They're advertising that. So that's a basically, we want to make ourselves different the same way Ireland has done on company tax. So, if you look at Shopify or Amazon or Google or any of those big American, big tech companies in the UK, they're not headquartered in the UK. They're headquartered in Ireland because they pay no company tax in Ireland.
Sure.
So it's obviously the same way Delaware, everyone incorporates their companies in Delaware in the US.
Right, of course.
It's a play.
I think that's super interesting to Portugal. I didn't know that actually, but I think that's really interesting. And I think that's going to become more interesting this year and the next 2 years, don't you? I think that's actually going to probably attract a lot of people and businesses as this begins
for the people who are in this space who are completely mobile, right? Yeah. And a lot of these people are kind of masters of the universe types. Anyone who is moving their money into Bitcoin or Ethereum or some other cryptocurrency, they're not doing it necessarily to be nice, right? They're doing it to be off the grid. They're doing it to avoid tax. Yeah. They're doing it to stick it to the man. And if a country like India is going to say, well, we're going to tax all capital gains at 30%, then there's got to be a percentage of wealthy crypto savvy Indians that say, nah, I'm going to move to Portugal.
Well, I think that probably in the next 4 years, you'll see some more interesting legislation coming out of the United States about a cryptocurrency too.
The US seems to be a long way behind.
Yeah, we are. We got other problems over here.
It seems like every week there's a big traditional bank or country or whatever else that kind of warns against the crypto scene. This week, the IMF warned that cryptocurrencies could damage emerging markets. Well, of course they're going to say that, right?
Of course.
Because they can't charge massive interest rates on third world debt if those third world countries decide to opt out of the global monetary system.
Exactly. Well, I think that's, and I don't want to be pejorative to Americans or American banks. I just don't think that, because as a consultant, I work with banks, and it just doesn't seem to be because that's one of the things I go talk to them is like, I ask executives at banks frequently, what are the things that keep you up at night? That's one of the things, cryptocurrency, challenger banks, micro banks. What are the things that you worry about? This doesn't seem to be a thing that's low on their list of things that they worry about.
Yeah, I can see that because we haven't got anywhere near mass market adoption yet. It's still too hard. Although having said that, I think Block, which what used to be called Square, is now Block. Jack from Twitter's business. What's the other one? Cash App, and a couple of other neobank style things that allow you to buy cryptocurrency with a single click on a mobile app. I use one in the UK called Revolut. Those types of things make it really, really easy to onboard someone.
Well, that was what you were saying earlier about NFTs too. It's from a consumer standpoint, it's difficult to get in, right? It's difficult to purchase. It's difficult to understand. I think people are curious, but it's difficult, right? And I think that certainly banks here recognize that, and they don't feel that it's an imminent threat or an immediate threat. We're very reactive in the United States.
Yeah, I think that the difference from the neobanks is not necessarily a blockchain thing; it's more of a UX thing, right?
Right,
so
right.
If I can download an app and I can take a selfie and that does facial recognition and it does an NFC scan of my passport, and the know your customer stuff is done in 7 seconds, and suddenly I've got a bank account because it's done a bit of facial recognition and done some database lookups, compared to a bank that makes me walk into a branch, fill out 7 forms, do a credit check, blah, 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 blah. It can take It can take days, and then I don't even know if they're going to let me be a customer, versus some of these new banks that just say, yeah, download the app, take a selfie, and off you go.
Right. Interestingly enough, but there's a story last week about the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service.
I did see this. Yeah.
About ID Me, a service that I'm particularly familiar with, have used in the past for business endeavors in the past, that they're going to require people to use ID Me and take a selfie to be able to access their IRS account. And people are flipping out about it here. Meanwhile, hundreds of millions of Americans are doing the 10-year challenge on Facebook, and it's fine. Somehow that's okay.
Right.
But we can't do ID Me. To your point,
we're going to do a whole program on ID, because I think ID is just such a central part of, what happens next. There's a whole bunch of issues around anonymity and privacy and ID, and what does ID mean, and it depends how you do it. I don't want to preempt any of that stuff, but if you're taking a selfie and you're hashing it and distributing that across the blockchain so that nobody could ever work out that it's actually your photo, then you again provide a public key that allows you to share that face with an organization like the IRS, then there's no privacy issue with that. Now,
but the layperson,
if you're sending that selfie as a JPEG and you've got someone in the customer center who's looking at it and going, "Oh yeah, that's Dave." Oh right.
Like some guys like, "Oh yeah." Wait, but that's the thing, and that goes back to an experience problem, right? Like not just a UX, but an experience and an understanding, maybe a marketing problem is that we, as people that work in this business, understand the technology to say it's safe, it's fine. But, like we're fighting against globally, I think, certainly here in the United States, a media machine that's pushing out this kind of conspiracy-ish information of like, about they're going to steal your identity, or it's, or the government or whatever. I wouldn't be
surprised if this news story came from someone like Amazon, who probably lost the contract for facial recognition with the government. You've always got to ask these questions. Who's pushing this story out, and what's their agenda? If it's coming from an investigative journalist, then that's fine. If it's coming from a PR firm of another competing ID company, then you got to sort of ask the question,
Right, like where did this come from? But media outlets, some will pick up a PR story and treat it as news.
Yeah, they'll do. Again, we're going to touch on this throughout the series, but there's another storyline from the Web3 crypto people that this is a completely flattening of the playing field. And I think it's worth noting that that's a really first world kind of viewpoint. So in order to get even onto this ladder, you need a decent phone or computer, you need a high-speed internet connection, you need a whole bunch of things that, everyone's saying, there's this Filipino gamer who made 10 times his salary playing in Axie Infinity last year during COVID. And it's like, yeah, okay, but for every single one of those, there's 10 million who can't even get onto the internet. So
I think it's interesting, but you could say the same about Web 2 and Web 1, can't you? Really?
Oh, totally. That's what I mean. I mean, the infrastructure bill in the US, as far as I understand it, part of that is to actually give broadband to places in America that don't have it. If there's an assumption that everyone in the US has got broadband internet, but it's not true.
No, not even remotely.
Yeah.
On the coasts, all along the coast, but the closer you get to the middle, you'll find you can't find cell phone coverage, let alone internet coverage.
Since we're going to be talking about metaverse a lot, right? And I was watching a video today where someone says, "Well, you can't mention the metaverse without mentioning Neil Stephenson's snow crash." So I'm going to, just because we have to tick that box. I reread it last week. It's interesting. It's a very dystopian view of the metaverse. It's a very dark view of it. But there's a piece which is kind of interesting where poor people log into the metaverse via public terminals, I guess like internet cafes circa
Right,
1999, right? And they rent skins or avatars. But those avatars are basically anyone who sees that avatar in the metaverse goes, oh, that's a poor person renting it. Because they're all the same. So,
I want to acknowledge your humble brag of saying that you read Snow Crash last week, as like you read it in a week.
As with all Neil Stephenson's books, they're not short, right? And there's some deep thinking. Apart from the fact that I'd forgotten that the part of the plot of that book is all about Sumerian culture and the history of the Tower of Babylon. And okay, so we're going to do a regular segment, which is a listener question. Even though this is our first episode, we did get a couple of people who follow us on social media who sent us in some questions. If you want to send us a question, want to talk about something, you can email us at podcast@pilotemedia.com. The links are in the show notes, or you can just follow Cory or myself on Twitter, LinkedIn. We're everywhere on social. You'll find us. You'll be able to get a message to us. I'm sure you'll be able to work that one out. So the question is this week, what is POAP? It's a new acronym from the
I just recently heard that one.
All right, so POAP. I mean, this is from the people who brought you NFT, right? And DAO. Like only an engineer or a coder can come up with these things and think that they're decent product names, right? So POAP is a very meta thing. It stands for Proof of Actual Participation. Basically, yeah, I know, it's funny. Basically, it's a badge that says I did something in the metaverse, or I was there. Basically, it's like a certificate that you get as a school kid who goes to sports day, and they say, "Well done, you turned up to sports day. You didn't win, but you were there. Here's a badge. Congratulations!" and not just that, we're going to mint this badge. And we're going to put it onto the blockchain for all eternity.
Well, like, what are your thoughts about where will that provide value?
Again, if we start to move into the next phase of utility for blockchain technology, so smart contracts and things like that, there are some people who are starting to use things like POAPs as within DAOs. So we need to explain what a DAO is. So DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. And basically what that means is that instead of having a company which is limited by shares, in which case the shareholders get a vote, if you have an organization which doesn't necessarily have shares but has tokens, for example, or a cryptocurrency, then some of these companies or organizations are allowing people who own those tokens or digital assets to be able to vote on certain things. Basically, it's a way of saying, I was here. By doing that action within the metaverse, it writes that into the blockchain and say, I was there, I turned up. And then some companies and brands are saying, well, we're going to reward you for turning up, right? So because you've spent the time and effort to actually come to our event and participate in the metaverse, and you can prove using this badge that you were there, you get certain rights. You might get a discount. You might get an airdrop. You might get whitelisted for the next NFT mint. Whatever it is. So,
and I could see this being kind of something that could be used going forward if you attend virtual events that are like conferences or learning events as like a continuing education credit. You have to prove that you attended a certain seminar or class to get credit. You can get a POAP.
Right. Absolutely. I think there's some real utility in terms of that sort of thing. If you were like, yes, sure. I was at a training course, and to prove that I listened to the lecture, I got this badge. Or, I sign up to webinars all the time, but I never turn up. But if there's an advantage to be able to prove that I did turn up, I guess like a goodie bag, right? You can go to
Yeah.
a real world event and you turn up, you get a goodie bag because the only people who get the goodie bag are the people who are actually in the room. I don't know if there's a secondary market in them because, if they're NFTs and maybe there's this concept. Do you remember the concept a couple of years ago where people were like waiting in line? Charging people to wait in line.
Yes, yeah.
So maybe this is part of the creator economy. You can hire people to go to events on your virtual events on your behalf and get the POAP and then sell it to the guy who really wanted to, who wasn't actually there but wants the benefit of being there.
You've just created a business.
I know, a secondary market in POAPs.
I love that.
Right, so we're going to do our what are we doing, what are we watching, what are we playing. I'm spending a bit of time on play-to-earn games. I'm trying to find a decentralized Web3 metaverse style play-to-earn cryptocurrency style game, which is as good as a AAA title. But I am yet to find a play-to-earn game which has got any of the gameplay or any of the production values of anything that I can play on my PlayStation or I can play on my iPad. I haven't managed to get into Roblox yet. Have you played any of the Roblox stuff?
Yeah. Forever. My kids got me into that years ago. And I haven't played it recently. I'll be honest with you. I haven't played it recently. But it's
not play to earn yet, right?
No, it's not play to earn yet. But if you've ever seen it or played it, it's fun, but it's Roblox. Right, I don't know how to describe it.
So the only one that I've found so far, which I get some enjoyment out of, is by Gala Games. These are the guys, I think they're like ex-Zynga. I think the guys who are behind Farmville, sort of behind this.
Oh, okay.
It's called Gala Games. They've got a couple of games, but one is called Town Star, which is basically a play-to-earn version of Farmville. It's really not easy. You've got to play it like 6 or 7 times or look up the YouTube cheats in order to actually be able to succeed at it. It's got some really interesting economics behind it, some really interesting strategy behind it. But the cool thing is that it's free to play. So you do not need to buy a $7,000 NFT in order to play. You can play just using a browser. You don't earn any money if you don't have the NFTs, but that's fine. It's kind of cool. It's kind of fun. And the other thing
I just looked it up. Is that the closest one that you've been able to find to an actual entertaining
I like
game?
It. It's really addictive. But like I say, you play it the first time and you go, I wish I'd known that. There's a ton of YouTube. There's a YouTube rabbit hole you can go down. There's a whole bunch of people who tell you how you can win and whatever else. But that's no fun, right? As a gamer, you want to be able to work it out yourself. But
right.
But you kind of get allocated a certain amount of money at the beginning, and the first time you play it, you're like, oh damn, I've run out of money. Or there's another thing which I'm not going to do spoilers, but it's like, okay, there's a certain resource that you have at the beginning that you cannot buy. You have to make it. And in order to make it, you need 7 other different, things that you need to build beforehand. But if you don't start that process early enough, then you run out and effectively the game is over. I'm looking at a couple of others, but I haven't found anything yet. I found one yesterday, which looks amazing, but I went onto it and it says, oh no, you have to buy an NFT in order to play. So it's like a space game. Remember Elite?
Yeah.
You'll remember Elite, right? The original space trading game.
Yeah.
Right. So all of these games are the same as Elite. But the difference is that Elite was free and you could play it on a Commodore 64. And this, in order to buy a ship, you need to spend, and I'm not kidding, $80,000 on a ship.
$80,000?
Yeah, it's like the I think they probably started this game when Ethereum was 7 cents, and they thought, 100 Ethereum is how much a ship is going to be, which would have been $7 at the time, but is now $80,000.
I've actually seen that game. I know what you're talking talking about $80,000. They make me do adjust.
Mad. Anyway, I'm watching a documentary made by Red Bull TV called The Life of Kai, which is about Kai Lenny. He's a Hawaiian big wave surfer. He does foiling, he does windsurfing, paddleboarding, whatever else. It's basically him tackling Jaws and Nazare in Portugal, and it's cool, super cool. Little doco. It's into its second series. He's nuts, but hey, I like it. So
now, how did you come across that?
I think I followed him on Instagram. I followed him on Instagram for a while.
Oh, okay. I am a lover of documentaries. I can't get enough. And whenever somebody turns me on to something, I always have to ask, how did you find it? Right? Because you get fed, like I've obviously, as they say, cut the cord. I'm all digital on my television. I watch most of the content. I watch a lot on the computer. But you get fed what the algorithm feeds you based upon watch history. And that that's in a way that's, of course, for most people, probably that's good. But I have, much like yourself, have such a varied interest. There's a lot of content out there that you never get exposed to, particularly on other platforms that, you never get to find stuff because you're just not connected to that platform yet, or maybe you haven't even heard of it. Right. So I always ask, like, where did you find that? That was really great. I'll tell you one of the things that I'm watching right now, which I shouldn't say I'm hesitant to mention it because of its controversial subject matter, but super interesting. There's a documentary on Showtime on Bill Cosby called We Need to Talk About Cosby. Have you heard of it? It's fascinating for me because, not to reveal my age too much, I kind of grew up on Bill Cosby too and was exposed to him at a young age as largely somebody that I saw as a educator, somebody, I saw on children's shows, and of course, Fat Albert, and then kind of grew up with him through the Cosby Show, was on during my youth. And, the story of him and what has happened with him recently, my exposure, understanding about it is largely comes from news coverage, and didn't know a lot of like the details other than just the sheer volume of women who have come out to say that they were assaulted by him. And you were like, man, he was talking about what he was doing fairly openly, and we didn't even realize it.
Which kind
very interesting.
Which in a weird way kind of brings us back to where we started the show. I mean, what happens to the value of an celebrity NFT? Right. If later on they are found out to be
right, they fall from grace. Like, what if we buy?
Although
I
did see
Brady
last week, and
NFT?
I don't know if this is fake news or not, but it could be. I need to look it up. I need to fact check this. But apparently, Lance Armstrong bought an NFT, and it's a cheetah. Which
is that true?
I don't know. Maybe
is that a joke? I thought that was a joke.
I don't know if I saw it on Twitter. I don't know if it was someone just being really funny or whether it's actually true.
You gotta check that. And it's testicle.
It does make you wonder, though, right? If you've bought into the celebrity cult and that celebrity then falls from grace at some point in the future, that NFT is going to be worth nothing.
Nothing. Or in some cases, it could be worth more.
Maybe it's going to be worth more. Maybe.
You never know.
Maybe if O.J. Simpson had sold NFTs, he would have.
Exactly. But you never know what, like you said, you could buy a celebrity, they could fall from grace, the value of their NFT could fall, and then it could rebound. Who knows?
This was a great start. And I'm looking forward to our next chats. Like I said, we've got some really interesting things to talk about. I want to talk about things like land rights in the metaverse. Yes. That's one of my pet peeves right now. De-washing, which is a term that I literally just coined, which is basically decentralization, the myth of decentralization. We're going to talk about Web3. We're going to talk about video games and DeFi and a whole bunch of other things, and actually some less hypey subjects. I think we're getting into a point where things like blockchain is going to come into its own in terms of B2B utility and manufacturing, which it doesn't necessarily have the same, cool factor as celebrity NFTs, but that's actually where the value of some of this stuff's going to come into play. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to bring on some interesting guests. We're going to bring on some friends, and it's going to be fun. So thanks, Cory.
Thank you, sir. Great chat.